Good morning, church. By His loving grace, we are gathered this morning to worship and to praise Him. Before we start, let's bow our head in prayer. Father, we are grateful for your love and your grace upon our life this morning, Lord Jesus. That through the week, Father, we experience your love, we experience your grace and your mercy. And we're just grateful for who you are, Father, as our Lord and Savior. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for this morning. Father, we are grateful for you. And we are grateful that your word has strengthened us and your praise and worship, Lord, lifts us up into your presence, Lord Jesus. And this morning, Father, we open our heart for your word. Speak the word of grace upon our life, Lord Jesus. Thank you, Father. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. This morning, we're going to start with the song, Grace, Grace, God's Grace. Marvelous grace of our loving Lord, grace that exceeds our sins and our guilt. Yonder on Calvary's mount are poured, there where the blood of the Lamb was spilled. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that will pardon and cleanse within. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all our sin. Sin and despair like the sea waves cold threaten the soul with infinite loss. Grace that is greater, yes, grace untold, points to the refuge, the mighty cross. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that will pardon and cleanse within. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all our sin. Dark is the stain that we cannot hide. What can avail to wash it away? Look, there is flowing a crimson tide, brighter than snow you may be today. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that will pardon and cleanse within. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all our sin. Marvelous, infinite, matchless grace, freely bestowed on all who believe. You that are longing to see His face, will you this moment His grace receive? Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that will pardon and cleanse within. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all grace, 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 God's grace, grace that will pardon and cleanse within. Grace, grace, God's grace, grace that is greater than all our sin. 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 Amen.
Amen.
He gives more grace when the burdens grow greater. He sends more strength when the labors increase. To added affliction, he adds his mercy. To multiplied trials, his multiplied peace. By Annie Johnson Flint.
Today's scripture reading is going to be from Ephesians 2, 4 through 9. But because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you have been saved. And God raised us up with Christ and sealed us with him in the heavenly realms in Christ Jesus, in order that in the coming ages he might show the incomparable riches of his grace, expressed in his kindness to us in Christ Jesus. For it is by grace that you've been saved, through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. Amen.
Good morning, Gateway family and friends. Welcome to another session of online service with us. Thank you for joining. My name's Wade Johnson, and wherever you are, we are so thankful that you're joining us, and we are encouraged by the feedback and the participation that we see on our online services and Facebook devotions and things like that. So thank you all. It's so good to be here. We're looking at this title called Multicolored. This is our series, and in this series we're going to be ending it today with a word that is just awesome. This is the most precious, beautiful word, I think, in Scripture, but it can also be the most scary one, and we're going to find out why as we go on. But this word for multicolored, in the Greek, we have the word poikilos, and that's what we've been looking at, and how this adjective has been describing, number one, we started a few weeks ago, trials. And James brings out in James chapter 1 that you and I, in this world, in this life, whatever we're doing, we're going to go through trials. Trials that help us to grow in our faith, trials that help us to apply what we know and what we believe, and to reveal that during these things. And so he calls these trials, he uses this word, poikilos trials, many colored trials, variegated, so many different kinds of trials that you and I face. I go through some that you don't, and vice versa, and we all go through things that are the same. We have common life trials. We have trials that are a result of our choices, perhaps, right? Our bad choices, and we go through difficult times, or we're a victim of someone else's choices towards us. We have trials that are specifically designed by God for us to help us grow in an area of our life. Those are awesome. They're designed by God for us. We have also, perhaps we go through persecution just for being a Christian or having a Christian worldview in today's society. So there's all kinds of trials we go through that James is saying. And then after that, he says, but if you lack wisdom, and you do, we all do, we lack real wisdom to go through these trials, to handle life situations and difficulties, and just common life in general. He says, and if you lack wisdom, he says, then ask God. And Paul calls this wisdom poikilos wisdom, this complex, multi-dimensional wisdom of God that is beyond finding out. In fact, in Romans 11:33, he says, oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments, and his paths are beyond tracing out. God's poikilos wisdom is so far above ours that it's worth our while to ask for his wisdom in our life rather than rely on our own human wisdom. And so these are great things that we've been discussing, how we have these trials, we have life situations, and God gives us access to his marvelous wisdom on how to get through it all, how to handle it, how to navigate through situations, how to handle my emotional state through them. All kinds of aspects. God's wisdom goes far beyond our human understanding, our human experience, our human feeling, and what we know to do with it. What a gift to you and I, isn't it? And this is found, Paul says, that Jesus Christ is the wisdom of God to us. And that's beautiful. Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of all things for us. And in this case, wisdom. And so from there, we have James explains the many trials and then the many wisdom. And then we get to Peter. And Peter kind of goes along this same thread. And in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 6, he says, "For a little while you may have to suffer through grief, through all kinds of trials." And he uses the same word that James does. He uses this poikilos word, this multi-varied, multicolored, multi-dimensional trials, all these kinds of things that you and I might go through in life. This is beyond just first century. This is applicable to any century, to all of us. And so he makes it known also to the recipients of his letter that we're going to go through trials. And it's going to cause us grief and pain. But then he says in 1 Peter 4:10, he complements that with, as James complemented trials with God's beautiful wisdom, Peter complements trials with God's poikilos grace. His multicolored, many-sided grace. Grace for all situations. And this is beautiful. He says, "Be good stewards of the many-sided grace of God that is given to you, that is given to us." Be good stewards of his many-sided grace. It's kind of like, if on my hand, simple illustration, on my hand I've got 5 digits and they're all different, right? Let's say we had different kinds of trials. And then, God doesn't give us a thumb for everyone, but we have a matching grace for each matching trial that we go through. And it's a beautiful compliment. And God's saying, and as Paul did, and Paul in 2 Corinthians 12:9, he kept approaching God and said, "I've got this thorn in my flesh, and it is driving me insane. Please, God, remove it." And he says that he went to God, he begged God 3 times, and finally God said to him, and everybody say it because I think you know it, God's reply, "My grace is sufficient for you. My grace is strong for you. My grace can match any hindrance, any obstacle, any handicap that you might have. My grace is sufficient for you." And Paul was like, "Oh, okay. Then in that case, I'll keep it." Not only is his grace sufficient in our trials, but it's also sufficient in our failures. Right? Paul says this in Romans 5:20. He says, "Where sin increased because of the law, grace super increased. Grace super abounded to cover all of our sin." We think we're just whatever the sin, God's grace super abounds. It super covers it. It's so awesome, God's grace. It's not just for the trials that we face, but it's also for the failures that we commit. It's also for the details of life that we go through. How is this possible? How is it possible that God's grace superabounds our sin? It's possible by Ephesians chapter 1, verse 7 and 8. This is so beautiful. It's so beautiful when you put this in together. It says, "We have redemption in Christ through his blood." You and I, who were enemies of God, who were on the other side of darkness, who are lost in our sin, have redemption in Christ through his blood. The forgiveness of all of our sins. Man, the forgiveness of them all. I mean, grace doesn't forgive only a few of them, it forgives all of them. According to the riches of his grace. That he lavished, I love this word picture. This grace that he lavished on you. He poured all over you. It's like taking that old bucket challenge and you're sitting there and they just pour buckets of water on you. It just drenches you. It's lavished grace upon you with all wisdom and understanding. Oh, the grace of God that covers all of us. That poured down upon us through Jesus Christ, that covered us in his blood. Grace is one of the most beautiful words and concepts that we have in Scripture. And I think for a large part of us, we don't even consider it. We don't even think about it. But this is so real. It's so true. If love is the motivator and grace is the means by which love is revealed. So what is this grace? This grace is unmerited, undeserved favor from God towards you and I. It is unmerited. It's nothing that we can earn. It's nothing that we deserve because we have been so good or so righteous or so, I'm such a good follower of God. He ought to. He ought to give me grace. There's nothing that you and I could ever do to earn God's grace. It is completely unearned and undeserved favor from God. And he looks down and he sees that we are just lost and enemies, and he pours out his grace upon us nonetheless. Man, if we truly grasp God's grace over us, it changes our heart, it changes our life, it changes our perspective, it changes how we think about ourselves and we think about others. Ephesians 2, this is the two beautiful verses, 7 and 8 here on grace. It says, God raised us up with Christ in order that in the coming ages he might show the incomparable riches of his grace expressed in his kindness to us in Jesus Christ. The riches of God's grace has been lavished on us through the kindness of Jesus, right? And it says that he will show it to everyone, which means this word show is to put on display as proof or evidence. And the fact that you and I have not deserved God's grace or favor or kindness, but he lavished it on us, he poured it on us, and then that becomes proof and evidence of God's kindness. That becomes proof and evidence that he's a gracious God. Ephesians 2:8 then continues. It says, for it's by God's grace. It's by his unmerited favor that he gives to us that we have been saved. It is by God's grace that you and I have been saved, that we have been washed clean, that we have been forgiven, that we have been put new robes and new clothes, and we are fresh before God, that we have been given eternal life. It is all by God's grace. We didn't deserve any of it. But you received it through faith. It was not our plan. It was not our effort. We didn't have a plan of salvation. We didn't work to get it. It's a gift of God. And this word gift, it means a present with its sacrifice. It means it costs something to give. God's gift is not a cheap gift. It's not like he has all kinds of sons and he says, just pick a son and I'll let one of them come down and give you redemption. No, it was a sacrifice. This gift of God cost something so that you and I could have the fullness and the riches of God's grace poured upon us. Oh, that's so beautiful. We didn't earn it. Not one of us did. So don't go around bragging that you must have done something amazing to earn God's favor. We didn't. Grace is undeserved, unmerited favor from God, a holy God in us, and he decides from love to pour out his grace upon you and I. Think about how God has displayed his multicolored grace. By grace, he chose us before the stars were created. By grace, he put his name on his heart before the earth was created. By grace, he called us before the seas were created. By grace, he saved us. By grace, again, he washed us clean. He forgave all of our sin. He redeemed us. By grace, he calls us his children. He adopted us into his family. By grace. Not because any one of us have earned it or deserved it, but by grace. The Bible is filled with stories of grace. Throughout the Bible, we'll see all kinds of stories of people who did not deserve God's grace, who did not earn it, but God poured it out on them. One such story is the story of David in 2 Samuel. And here we have King Saul, who was the king of Israel, the first king, and his son Jonathan, who was the heir to the throne. And Jonathan and David became best friends, BFFs, right? They made covenants together and they promises together. In fact, Jonathan kept Saul from killing him. He tried to protect David as much as he could. And so at one time, Saul and Jonathan are in a battle, and they are killed. And so now the throne is open. And so assassins go in and they kill Saul's other son. And so no more heir except for one, this little boy, 5 years old. He was Jonathan's son. And his name was Mephibosheth. And the nurse took him up when she heard the news that everyone was being killed. And she ran and she tripped and she fell and she landed on his feet, and his feet became lame. And then the story goes on. He's taken away. He's being hidden away. And then David comes, he ascends to the throne. And of course, in those times, any kind of previous dynasty, and this is why Saul's son was assassinated, they want to kill the whole family so that no one can rise up and war for the throne. So as David is on the throne, and he's fighting battles, and he's gaining victories, and he's establishing the kingdom, he says to his people, he says in chapter 9, verse 3, "Is anyone from Saul's family still alive to whom I can show the kindness of God?" Man, that's unheard of. In a dynasty, in kingdoms, in these kind of royalty situations, if they're of an opposing family, you annihilate them. But here's David with the heart of God, knowing that he has what he has only because of grace. He's been given everything and victories and kingship only by grace. It was God that anointed him. God that gave it to him. And he says, who can I show God's kindness to in the house of Saul, in my enemy's house? Who can I show kindness to? And one of Saul's former servants told him about Mephibosheth, and so they brought him back. And in verse 7, he stood before David, and David said to him, "Do not be afraid, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you everything that your grandfather, King Saul, had. His lands, his possessions, his servants, they're all going to be yours. Everything I give to you." He says, not only that, you are going to sit at my table every mealtime as one of my own sons. You are in the palace. Think about the grace that David lavished upon him, that he poured upon Mephibosheth. And when Mephibosheth, he heard this, much like maybe you and I, he said in verse 8, he bowed down before the king and he said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? I am weak. I am lame. You have every right to destroy me. But you've shown me grace. You didn't just show me a little bit of grace. You lavished this outpouring of grace upon me that I don't deserve." And it says in verse 11 that Mephibosheth, he ate at David's table as one of the king's sons. And then it ends the chapter by saying, "And he was lame in both his feet." It keeps referring to his lame feet. And the thing is that when you bring someone into the table, and you have a table and everyone's feet is underneath, we can't see. We can't see the lameness. We can't see our imperfections. It's covered by this table of grace. Come to my table and feast. Come to my table, be a part of my family. And grace will cover everything that is a hindrance to you. Grace will cover everything that you don't think is worthy. Grace will cover everything that you have failed, you have done, you have made mistakes. Whatever it is, God's table of grace covers it all. We see this. This is represented also when Jesus said to his disciples that you've been all clean, but let me wash your feet. And Peter is like, "No, clean my whole body, my whole body." And he said, "No, your body is clean." But the feet represent our walk with God, our walk in life, our trips and our trials and our dusty and our failures and our mistakes. And Jesus washes our feet, and our feet are under the table of grace, and we are at the family, eating with one another. It's a beautiful, beautiful story of grace. And this grace, it comes into me, and I just think, wow, God has given me my life story. If I think of one word that describes my life, I always think of grace. I think, wow, God had so much grace on me. He's so gracious to me. I don't deserve anything. All I have done, all the places I have been, all that God has blessed me with, it's all grace. I do not deserve any of it. Not one thing. My family I was born into, the opportunities that I had, the church family I was in, the encouragement of God's people into my life, it's all been grace. I haven't deserved any of it. In fact, when I got married, my wedding band, right? My wife and I, before we got married, we went and we got wedding bands. And then inside the wedding band, we said, okay, here, I said, Paula, you take mine and I'll take yours. And we will write an inscription note to one another inside the wedding bands. So I took mine and I went, and all I could think about is grace. Grace. Paula is a gift of grace to me from God. I don't deserve her. She's way up there, right? I mean, if I lived in a caste system, I'd be in the lowest, and she's like, I married up, really up. And this grace, and so I just wrote in there my gift of grace, my precious gift of grace, because I don't deserve. God blessed me. And I'm not saying that because she's sitting here. I'm saying that because it's true. And then when I took the ring and we exchanged rings and I read what was inside of hers, you know what? It was the exact, because I said, you know what? I'm not rich enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not smart enough for you. I'm way lower, but God's grace. And when I read hers, it said the same thing. It said the same thing. It said, you're not rich enough. You're not handsome enough. You're not smart enough, but good luck, right? Good luck to me. I hope. No, I'm joking. It didn't say that. Hers was about God's love. Mine was about God's grace. Love and grace. But here's the thing. You and I, we are receivers of this outpouring of God's grace. We received it at salvation. We've been receiving it every day. We receive it for our trials, for our circumstances, for our life. God is good. But the other part of the verse of today in 1 Peter 4:10 is it says, be faithful stewards of the various forms of grace. Be faithful stewards. Not only are you and I receivers, man, we're receivers of such grace, but we are givers. Stewards. This word steward is not to hold on to and care for. This word steward is about giving it out. We're just a conduit of God's grace. Everything He's given to us, every gift, every blessing, every opportunity, everything, we give it back out to others. We don't hold on to it. John Piper said this, grace is the currency in the household of God. Grace is the currency. We are all called to be stewards of grace. We are recipients of grace, and it's our duty, it's our obligation as servants of the King to disperse this grace that we have been given. Give it to others. In fact, Jesus said in Matthew 10:8, He said, freely you have received, freely give. He told the disciples, look, I have given you everything. You have been healed, you have been blessed, you have been saved, you have been given food and provisions and everything. Now freely give it out. We're not to be containers, we're to be funnels. And we give out that grace that God gives to us freely. I need to ask the question, like David asked, to whom can I show God's kindness? To whom can you show God's unmerited, undeserved grace? Who is it? Someone who doesn't deserve it, someone who hasn't earned it. Is there someone that you can be a dispenser of God's grace to? Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it's a wayward child. Maybe it's a spouse. Maybe it's a coworker or a neighbor or whoever it might be. Who is it that you say, you know what? Someone comes to mind, you go, oh, no, yeah, okay, not them. They don't deserve it. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. The point of grace is that we give God's goodness and God's kindness and God's favor to those who don't deserve it, to those who haven't earned it. But they hurt me. They stabbed me in the back. They cheated me. They ruined my business. There's so many reasons that we can say, you don't deserve it. But think of the millions of reasons that God could say that I don't deserve it. But God's grace, because it's so multidimensional, it covers all those reasons. And it says, because God has been gracious to me, I will dispense that grace to others. So in closing, for those that have put their faith in Jesus Christ, as we end this series, we will go through poikilos trials. We will go through just life as well. And we are receivers of both God's wisdom and God's grace. As we go through this life, you and I have access to God's wisdom to understand it, to deal with it, and God's grace to go through it. How beautiful is that? And it's not just a little bit, it's multicolored. It superabounds. But also, as believers in Christ, it's our expectation that we be givers of God's grace. We don't just receive. If that's all we do, then we are, selfish in nature. We are hoarders of God's grace. But we are givers. God says, be good stewards, faithful stewards, to give it out. Give it freely. Give it without expectations back. Give it without a cost from them, but actually, like God's gift, it's a sacrifice to you. If you have never trusted in Jesus Christ, then all we're left with is our human understanding, our human wisdom, our human knowledge, our human experience, our human feelings. And we have to deal with all these things according to just what we know. But you also can have God's wisdom, God's grace through Jesus Christ if you put your faith in him. If you say, Jesus, and you can do it now. You can just say, Lord, Jesus, I believe you are God's son. I believe that you died for me and that your blood will cleanse all of my sin. I believe, forgive me. I repent of my sin. I just want to be clean before you. Be my Lord and Savior. And as we humble ourselves and we believe on him, he sends his Spirit to live inside of us. And that Spirit connects us with God. And we become a child of God. And we have access to all the heavenly blessings, all the riches of his grace, and all his multicolored wisdom. Believe on him today. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much. We know, God, that the trials of our faith, they are necessary. They are necessary for us. In fact, it proves that you love us because you want us to grow in our character. You want us to grow in our faith and our trust and dependence upon you. You want us to become more like your Son, Jesus Christ, in character and in life, in words and in actions. Because that's going to save us. It's going to save us from trouble. It's going to save us from despair. And it's going to set us free in areas in our life. So trials, we can rejoice in them, as both James and Peter say. Because the purpose and the outcome is all for our benefit. And Lord, we are so thankful that your grace and your wisdom are on superabounding, just waiting for us to be siphoned into us for each trial, each situation, each life experience. God, we thank you that you don't just let us go through things on our own and say, well, good luck. But you provide your wisdom and your grace for us. Oh, Lord, thank you. Father, help us to be receivers of that grace, receivers of that wisdom. And Lord, help us to be givers of it as well. May we this week ask you, Lord, who can I show your kindness to? We thank you. Bless us all in your name and to your glory. In Jesus Christ's name. Amen. Amen. Thank you, everyone. God bless you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. See you next time.
Truly by grace and His grace alone that we still exist in this world today. As we close this worship this morning, as we close our Sunday service this morning, we're going to sing our old hymn called Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saves a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Was grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieve. How precious deeds that grace appeared, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. This grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. The Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind,